What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today I want to talk to you about a time of lawlessness. A time where businesses ruled the day and acted with impunity. A time when workers had to band together and fight against the businesses in order to get their fair share and in order to improve their working conditions. You see, in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, you either had to strike, and that brought with it violence, or you had to move around and try to find somewhere where you can get something to eat because times were tough, wages were low, rights were none, and workers had to fight for it. And it was strike and fight, and that was it. And there was a lot of bloodshed and a lot of disruption of business, and it was contentious and it was violent and it was persistent because workers were fed up with how much they were abused and how little they got paid and the long hours that they worked, and their kids had to work, and life was very hard for the working class and the working poor. So much so was this strife and upheaval that the government had to pass a law in order to try to force rules that would make this contentious fight a legal one, as opposed to a bloody one in the streets. And then it was in the interest of protecting commerce. It's the whole reason they did it. That law is called the National Labor Relations Act. This law governs how the relationship between management and workers is supposed to go. This law is the rule book. And it's important that we understand no union bylaws and no constitution written by a union can have rules in it that are counter to what the National Labor Relations Act is. This law supersedes any constitution, any bylaw. If your rules run counterintuitive to the National Labor Relations Act, the National Labor Relations Act takes precedence. Now, what I want to dive into is the National Labor Relations Act, because I think we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what this relationship is supposed to look like. So we're going to start with definitions, and we're going to start with employer. It's going to be real quick. The term employer includes any person acting as an agent of an employer, directly or indirectly. Pretty straightforward. The term employee shall include any employee and shall not be limited to the employees of a particular employer. This includes employees that are laid off because of unfair labor practices, who may be disputing, and stuff of that nature. Now, you got those two definitions. Then it gives you a bunch of other definitions that talk about the agreement. You got the Labor Relations Board and what it's doing. And by the way, Amazon, Tesla, and Trader Joe's are all trying to fight a legal battle to say that the National Labor Relations Board is unconstitutional. And we ought to pay close attention to that legal battle, because that's an important one that's going on right now. I brought it up because I'm reading National Labor Relations Board. What that is the organization that basically makes determinations on whether or not the National Labor Relations Act was violated by an employer or not, if there's a case or not, and they adjudicate those cases. Now we're going to go down to the rights of employees, because that's important. Employees have the right to self-organization, to form, join, or assist labor organizations, to bargain collectively through representatives of their own choosing, and to engage in other concerted activities for the purpose of collective bargaining or other mutual aid or protection, and shall also have the right to refrain from any or all such activities except to the extent that such right may be affected by an agreement requiring membership in a labor organization as a condition of employment. Now you got that's your rights, okay? You have the right to self-organize, to form a union, to have that union or your representatives collectively bargain on your behalf. All of this thing is guaranteed to you by the National Labor Relations Act. Now, we talk about unfair labor practices, and this is important. It shall be an unfair labor practice for an employer to interfere with, restrain, or coerce employees in the exercise of the rights that are guaranteed in Section 7, which we just read. So it's unfair labor practice if an employer interferes with, restrains, or it tries to convince employees to work in contrast to what their rights that are guaranteed, or to take away or suppress the rights that are guaranteed. It's also an unfair labor practice for an employer to dominate or interfere with the formation or administration of any labor organization. That means that an employer can't have influence over a labor organization. They can't have influence over the formation or the administration of any labor organization. It can't contribute financially or can't provide other support to it. Provided that subject to rules and regulations made and published by the board pursuant to Section 6, this is referring another section, an employer shall not be prohibited from permitting employees to confer with him during working hours without loss of time or pay. An employer is not allowed to discriminate in regard to hire or tenure of employment or any term or condition of employment to encourage or discourage membership in any labor organization, provided that nothing in this act or in any other statute of the United States shall preclude an employer from making an agreement with a labor organization. They can't discharge or otherwise discriminate against an employee because he has filed charges. So all of these things are unfair labor practices. They cannot refuse to bargain collectively with the representatives of the employees. So unfair labor practices, right? But the one that sticks out to me, because it's something that that unions have faced since the very beginning. When unions were formed early on, employers would send people to go join those unions and infiltrate and do misinformation and all kinds of other underhanded tactics to undermine those unions. Employers would do that regularly. And the National Labor Relations Act bars that. So they're not allowed to do that anymore. They're not allowed to dominate or interfere with the formation or the administration of any labor organization. And that's something that I think we need to remember as trade unionists, as union members. We need to remember that. Supervision is not allowed to have an influence on anything that the labor union does. They're not allowed to mess with the administration of it. They're not allowed to mess with it financially. Supervision is not allowed to be in the room, essentially, with labor organizations. And that's something I think that we need to remember as union members and hold each other to account. We got to protect what's ours, because if we don't protect it, it'll just get undermined and manipulated in the way that it used to back in the day. If we don't protect our union will not last. And that's something that I think we need to realize, because unions are the shield for the working class. They are the spear of the working class, and they help to raise the wages of everybody around them. And it's on us union members to protect and fight for our unions, to be as strong as they can so that we can provide the biggest lift possible, because people need it. People are starving out here. Everybody's living paycheck to paycheck. We really have to do an excellent job in order to influence the market and raise wages for everybody. People haven't gotten a raise in 20 years. My name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Remember, the fight's not left and right. It's up and down. It's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. And remember, there could be no union without you and I front and center. Let's go.